Welcome back to My Life. This is our second episode with Father Michael Verschaeve from St. Joseph's Parish in Lake Orion. In our last episode, we concluded about talking about Father Michael's early life and being born in Mount Clemens. We also spoke about a trip to Africa that he recently took with his brother, visit to Ghana. And Father wanted to share some more information about that with us, so please do.
Okay, well, thank you, John. It's wonderful to be here and to be able to share some of the stories. So, as I mentioned in our first session, I was accompanying my brother and 15 honors students from Grand Valley State, and they were involved in human trafficking and water projects. One interesting story that I experienced there was when a water tap was turned on in a village for the first time in a place that didn't have potable water. Atachedo, a little village maybe 15, 16 miles away from Winneba, which is a coastal village in Ghana and a fishing village. So we were all invited to a ceremony for the turning on of the tap. Prior to the bringing an extension of this water source to the village, they had only cisterns, mostly river water to drink. And in the tropics, you know, there's a lot of microbes in water. We were told strictly as a group, do not even step into fresh water. We get swimmer's itch here in the summertime, you know, in our lakes, and we get a rash. There they have different kinds of parasites that'll burrow into your skin and create flesh-eating diseases and so on. So in this little town of Atachedo, 250 villagers, 150 of which were children. Finally, 3 years ago, a school was built for them. But the children were dipping buckets of water from the river to carry with them to school each day, exposing themselves to all kinds of health risks, not alone just drinking the water taken from the river. Not only the tropical waters have all kinds of microbes and so on, but upstream from that village, the Chinese have been mining gold. And so we recently heard of the disaster in Colorado, the mining. Well, there are rivers like that too, you know, an ongoing way, because they don't have the regulations and so on. So the turning on of this tap was a big event. It meant health for these children, for the whole village. They're also provided a water tank by a small NGO that my brother helped establish with Grand Valley students and local people. And so it was a big moment for them. So we were invited to the ceremony. It was next to the school. All the school children were there. They sang and recited. The village chief was there, his elder, his council, and the rest of us. And so there were speeches given. And an interesting thing in African culture, it's wonderful, we probably should imitate it. When somebody speaks in a public gathering, there's an interpreter there who says it again. Everything is spoken twice, so there's no misunderstanding. So the chief spoke, and then his interpreter spoke again so everybody could hear. And my brother and the water scientist, Dr. Peter Wampler, was asked to speak, and it was repeated again. And then once all the speeches were done, then the praying started. And although they have a little Christian church in that village, the elder prayed in an ancient African dialect to the gods, to the tree gods and the water gods, and you know, and then they poured libations on the ground of schnapps. The Germans occupied Ghana at one time, and so they came to value schnapps as something very precious. So they offered that to the gods, and my brother had to bring 3 bottles of schnapps to the ceremony, one for the chief, one for his council, and one for the gods that was poured on the ground. And then once the praying was done, then the water tap was unlocked, and then my brother and the water scientists were given cups of water to drink. And it was a little anxious for them because the flora in the stomachs of Americans is different than Africans, and they were afraid maybe that it wasn't to the standards that we're used to. But in the end, the water was good. There was great rejoicing and cheering, and my brother was a big hero in that little village that day too, because he brought soccer balls to the children. They loved to play soccer, and they would wear out a soccer ball within a day or two there. So, but it was a wonderful experience. you saw what friendship between the Grand Valley students and their projects and the African people working together created, and really life and health for a small little village. After it was all over, going back with my brother to where we were staying, I said, well, there must be 100 villages like this here in Ghana and in West Africa. He said, no, thousands. Thousands. So,
and just to get this all in perspective, when you're talking about turning on a water spigot, we're not talking about turning on a faucet in somebody's kitchen. We're talking about the town spigot, right?
That's right.
And I would imagine these people have to take containers and fill them and cart them back to their homes.
Exactly.
And as far as their homes go, what are their homes like?
Typically, in a village, an African village now, they would be cement or block. You know, they make their own, manufacture their own blocks. It's a home industry there. When you drive along the highways, you see people selling cinder blocks, cement blocks, and maybe tin roofs, or sometimes, reed roofs, of natural materials. But very simple, very humble.
Yeah, that kind of leads me into another question I have. How do these people earn a living now in this day and age?
Agriculture, mostly. Sometimes hunting. Sometimes going to a larger village to work. But transportation's a huge problem. The roads are almost impassable. So you would see women walking the dirt roads back to the bigger villages or market centers or to the city with their goods to sell on their heads with enormous baskets, walking. So that would be typical in a lot of countries, not only in West Africa and other places, but even in Latin America too. And I came home realizing we're the richest people in the world. Not only can we turn on a tap here in Michigan and drink clean, fresh, safe water, but we heat the water for our showers in the morning. I didn't have a hot shower the whole time I was in Africa, and that's not untypical there. Of course, it's tropical and it's 80 degrees at night, and so it's good. The cold water feels good in the morning sometimes, but I take for granted some of the blessings that I've known, and so that was one great experience there. Another thing that really impressed me in the 2 weeks I was there, and I'm not an expert on Africa by any means, but the faith of people there. I mentioned the first segment, God is all over them. So the colonial period brought Catholic and mainline Protestant churches to them, who brought orphanages, schools, and hospitals. Today, another import from the West are evangelical churches from our country. So evangelical style churches are springing up all over. There's so many of them that they call them mushroom churches. They just spring up. In fact, along the roads in some towns, you can buy pulpits. They manufacture them, and plexiglass or glass pulpit, and if you want to start your own church. So, religion is so much a part of the fabric of their experience, their culture, their life. Walking around the University of Ghana at night, students pour out of the dorms and form spontaneous prayer meetings out in the dark on the campus. You hear them singing in harmony or chanting or speaking in tongues. Religion's very important there. But my experience in the Catholic Church was beautiful. I celebrated Mass twice on the 2 Sundays I was in Ghana. And I was welcomed by the local pastor. And here in our country, and here at St. Joe's Lake Orion, Mass is about an hour, and we expect it to be about an hour, and we have things to do. But when people go to Mass in Ghana, 2 hours is necessary for, yes.
I want to pick up on that in just a minute. We're going to take a brief break. Back with Father Michael Verschaeve in a minute.
The Agent Orange Education Program is coming to the Oxford area. Presented by the Vietnam Veterans of America and Christ the King Church in Oxford. Learn about the health risks of Agent Orange exposure at the Agent Orange Town Hall, October 24th at Christ the King Church, 1550 West Drainer Road. Registration at 11 a.m. and Town Hall at noon.
Back with Father Michael Verschaeve on My Life. He's the pastor of St. Joseph's Parish in Lake Orion, talking about your recent trip to Africa and saying Mass over there. You were talking about the length of Masses. Why don't you pick up on that?
Fine. So the people, when they attend religious services, whether they're Catholic Masses or Protestant services or evangelical prayer meetings, they expect to stay a while. And they sing and they dance. And so at Mass at the University Parish, then later in Winneba at Sacred Heart Parish in Winneba, Ghana, Masses were filled with music. At Winneba, the 7 o'clock in the morning Mass, 2 choirs, 10 altar servers, incense. The church is packed, they're out the door. And they have lights and PA system in there. But then during the second reading, early in the Mass, the lights went out. And the pastor leaned over to me and said, "This is a real problem for us. Because of corruption in the political system, a lot of times electricity is sold to neighboring countries at certain times of day, or certain cities are turned off. And so someone got up and went out and started the generator, and the lights came back on, and then they went down. Finally, after the 3rd or 4th time, the lights were on, the generator was running. But the intensity of the attention to God's Word, to the singing, to the praying. There's a part in our Catholic Mass where we call it the prayers of the faithful. And here, the prayers are written out and we pray to God for this intention, that intention, and our response is we pray to the Lord. There, they had 4 or 5 people come up who spontaneously prayed the prayer of the faithful. And in the first place I attended Mass there was the University Parish, and one of the intentions, the woman prayed to God that the scourge of human trafficking would be eliminated for us, that the children and families be reunited, that they be rescued. She went on for almost 5 minutes, and you could see the congregation praying with her, and at the end of her prayer, then the choir started. We pray to the Lord, and everybody sang. And that's the way they pray there. And we're a little bit more formal here because of our culture, but it was beautiful. And
do you think in some ways this was kind of a distraction from their way of life, being able to take a break and get together like this?
I don't think it was a distraction. It's integral to their life.
Really?
They couldn't. They wouldn't. It wouldn't be Sunday if they didn't worship. You know. So they come, and then I mentioned dancing. For the offertory collection, they don't pass the basket there. Everybody gets up out of the pews and brings their offering forward as the choir sings, and they dance. They dance their gifts to God to the altar, put it in the box, and then they go dance back to their places, the whole church. And then after Holy Communion, later in the Eucharist, they had a second collection for the bishop's cause. So that another choir starts singing, and they dance their offerings to the altar, and it's like total participation. They're total giving of themselves, not just their monetary gifts, but their spirit, their song, you know, their dancing. And so I've told people, I was almost moved to tears sitting there at these Eucharists. The Mass is so familiar to me. You know, it's what I know is their Catholic worship, but it was augmented so much by the intensity of the prayer. And people are there poor. In Winneba, there were people dressed in 3-piece suits or African traditional garb, and people were barefoot and not dressed so well because they were poor, but all together worshiping. And there, a lot of the prayers were in the Fanti language I didn't understand, but from the expressions on their faces, you could see that they were pouring out their hearts to God. And it was just a wonderful memory for me. And I come home thinking, I wonder how we can dance here at St. Joseph's or pray more spontaneously, but we have to get it done in an hour, you know. So
that's right, or else there's some finger shaking, or else you run into the next Mass.
That's
actually,
right. Yes, right.
You'd have to reschedule
or people would leave. You know, they dance out the door probably. So,
tell me, you mentioned all these different religions that are penetrating the country. Do they bring other good things with them in addition to the religious aspect of what they do to help those people out?
Well, that's an interesting question, John. The presence of the Mormons is strong there, presence of Jehovah's Witnesses even, all imports from our country. And, you know, depending on their traditions, they bring, material help. They'll bring schools sometimes. But I don't want to be critical of other traditions, but more than one person said to me, the colonials came with the people who conquered us, and they brought their religions, but they brought schools and they brought hospitals, and they helped us. The new religions come and they just take.
Really?
Well, they demand tithing, and we all have to give, of course, but they're not so focused on meeting material needs as much as spiritual needs. Now, that could raise a whole controversy about what religion is about, but I think in many traditions we think of the whole person. Sometimes a way to God is giving them something to eat first, or helping them with work.
Exactly.
And so on.
Or bring them food and medicine.
That's right.
Yeah.
Improve the quality of their life, and not only their spiritual life.
Right. Well, we started talking about Father Michael Verschaeve and his life a while ago. I'd like to backtrack a little bit to that. Let's take you back to your grade school days. Now, were you in Mount Clemens when you attended grade school?
No, we had moved out to Washington Township, and so I was...
that was really out in the country back then.
It was. We lived on Shaner Road, and we were the only house between the mile roads when my father built that house in 1954. And so we lived on a dirt road, walked to 27 Mile Road to get the bus to take the hour ride to St. Clement's School. And I was there for 8 grades. It was wonderful, We had nuns teaching us. There was
What was your father doing at that time? Was he still farming?
No, we were on a small farm. We had 10 acres. We did truck farming, but my father worked at Ford Motor Company. So after World War II, he came home, and at the age of 19, he began working at Ford Sterling plant, 17 and a half in Mound, and he was a boiler operator there.
Was he in World War II?
He was. My father served at the end of World War II. He enlisted in the Navy when he was 17. My grandmother had assigned permission for him. And he served on an LCI, a small ship, a landing craft infantry. It was a kind of ship that would take Marines and land them on beaches. And they were preparing for the invasion of Japan when the bomb was dropped. In fact, my father, one of the duties they had was to remove the natives from Bikini Island before the atomic bomb was dropped there after the war ended, as a demonstration. And we have pictures from National Geographic of my father on the boat as the natives are being brought onto his ship. Yeah.
Really? Okay. I have to take a little break here. We'll be right back with Father Michael Verschaeve.
Attention all local veterans. Free eye exams are coming to American Legion Post 108. The event is sponsored in part by Post 108 and by the Michigan Society of Eye Physicians and Surgeons. Certified eye care specialists and surgeons will provide free care to veterans and their families. Saturday, October 31st from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at American Legion Post 108.
Back with Father Michael Verschaeve on My Life, pastor of St. Joseph's Church in Lake Orion. We just talked about your dad in World War II, but I want to get back to you. When did you start thinking about being a priest?
That's a good question, John. Every little kid wants to be something. You want to be a policeman or a fireman, or today they want to be pro wrestlers or speed car drivers. When I was about 5, going to church with my family, my grandmothers, I said, I want to be a priest. Of course, when you're 5, it's like, I want to be a policeman, I want to be an astronaut. Of course, there weren't astronauts back in those days, but that was a dream I had, and so I kind of grew up with the idea. My family was devout, had a good foundation in a Catholic school, so when it came time for high school, I entered the seminary high school in Detroit. So
did you have brothers or sisters?
I'm the oldest of 9.
9 kids?
Yeah.
Oh my.
So I left home, became a boarding student at the seminary high school, which no longer exists, at the age of 14. And I tell my parents, I never went through an adolescent rebellion because I left home so young. So they better watch out. it's still coming. So
There were other people watching over you during those years.
that's right. But I had the wonderful education in high school seminary, went on to this college seminary there in Detroit, and all through my life, my reasons for wanting to be a priest changed. Wasn't, as a little boy wanting to be a priest because, he's a hero of the community or something. I came to see the vocation to serve in ministry in the church as a real opportunity to give my life to God, to Jesus, and to, I want to say make a difference. After 38 years as a priest, I'm more humble about this vocation. I think it's God who takes care of His church. I think it's the faith of the people that have influenced my faith, that have taught me about what it means to be a pastor, that have inspired me and challenged me and made me crazy sometimes too. The work of ministry isn't always easy. I get consolation reading St. Paul, especially the Corinthians, when he talks about pastoring the Corinthian community. I said, wow, I would never want to change places with him. But, the people of God, it's in the church where we encounter Jesus. And so the pastor has a privileged position of being there to encounter Jesus and the people in daily work and ministry. And so, my brother once said to me, my brother who's a retired sheet metal worker and building inspector, he said, Mick, you're the only one in our family who really likes his job. But some days it's the challenge, but I think God's blessed me, to think that from early on. And so Jeremiah the prophet's kind of a hero for me. He was called at a young age as a teenager. And even when God called him, he stuttered, Lord, I don't know how to speak. And so I think, well, that's kind of my story too. And I'm still learning how to speak. So.
In your role as pastor of a church, there's so much ground for you to cover. It's not just about saying Mass and preaching on Sundays or teaching a religion class to school kids or preparing people for marriage. There's so many other things that can happen to you. You talk to people on their deathbed. You talk to people with unimaginable problems. Is there anything that you can think of that comes to mind that really took you by surprise, where after you were done with it, you said to yourself, man, they didn't tell me about this in the seminary?
Well, John, that's a good question. A couple things come to mind. Early on, walking into ICU units, although I had some chaplaincy training before I was ordained while I was in seminary, but you walk into life and death situations or to emergency room where there's been a tragedy or a drowning or something, and I said, how am I going to get myself to walk through that door? And over the years I've learned nothing human is foreign to me. What's going on in there is very human, and so Holy Spirit and God's given me courage to be able to walk into situations that other people would run from and not be afraid. But that's all good stuff in ministry. For me, dealing with engaged couples, I've probably done over 1,000 weddings in my career. That's been gravy in the ministry for me, dealing with young people who are in love. But most difficult thing that they didn't prepare me for in the seminary is to be a CEO of a corporation. So St. Joseph.
Don't you love that job?
Well, retired priests, senior priests say, well, once I retired and stepped away from the administrative responsibilities, then I could be the priest that I was ordained to be.
Right.
Just to be there for the people,
Yeah.
So, but that's part of work, and even St. Paul says that administration is one of the necessary gifts for the church, and so that's part of,
Now, what seminary did you graduate from before you were ordained?
St. John's Provincial Seminary in Plymouth, Michigan.
The Archdiocese of Detroit.
Yes, it was actually provincial for the whole state of Michigan. It's closed now, and the theology programs moved back to the city to Sacred Heart Seminary.
And your first assignment was?
St. Francis Cabrini Parish in Allen Park. And we had a high school and a grade school, and there were 3 of us priests there working, and it was a wonderful experience. In fact, go ahead.
What surprised you most when you got out in the field, so to speak?
Well, I suppose I had a lot of brothers and sisters who were teenagers at the time, but when the pastor said, "I want you to be chaplain of the high school," that was a big shock, because I didn't know what teenagers were like, you know, what kind of a tribe was this, you know, but it was a wonderful experience, and got to be close friends with many of those young people, celebrated their weddings, and still friends with many of them today. So that was a little bit of a shock.
How many years were you at that?
3 years.
And where did you go from there?
Then I went to St. Linus Parish in Dearborn Heights for 2.5 years, and was associate pastor there. And then I was assigned to St. Joseph Parish, Monroe, my first pastorate. So I was there alone as the chief pastor of the parish. Wonderful Sicilian community on the east side of Monroe, where the people taught me how to love eating pasta and taught me how to be a pastor. They said, "Father Mike, we'll help you." And they did. They did. A very strong, simple faith there in that community, very generous to the poor, and very loving of their pastors. And so I wasn't the first new pastor that they trained, and so I was very grateful. They gave me a strong foundation in pastoral ministry.
Well, of course, Monroe is my hometown, and there's some very deep Catholic roots there.
Very much so.
My goodness, the French go back to the 1700s.
1788 was when St. Mary Parish was
Yeah,
founded.
it was my home parish.
Wow.
Yeah. And so you were on the Italian side of town.
I was.
Did you have any pizza from Detroit Beach Pizzeria?
I visited there once or twice.
So what year did they move you on from there?
1987 then, I was transferred to St. Alfred Parish in Taylor. I was there for 13 years. It's the only Catholic parish that sits right on Telegraph Avenue. And it was a wonderful experience. We had a school there, very active outreach to the poor there. And it was a good experience. From there I came to North Oakland County, to St. Anne in Ortonville for 3 years, and then in 2003 back to my home parish, St. Joseph, Lake Orion. So an interesting story is when I was a teenager, I was hired by the pastor of St. Joseph with another young man to cut grass and mop floors, the summer job. My first paycheck came from St. Joseph, Lake Orion, and if I persist to retirement, my last paycheck will come from there too.
Well, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on our program. Let me ask you one last question that I try to ask everyone I talk to. Okay. If you were able to do it all over again, would you make any changes?
John, that's an impossible question, but I reflect on that often, just how lucky I am to have fallen into this way of life, this work. I feel blessed and grateful, and I suppose in the end I wouldn't change a thing.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for joining us. Father Michael Verschaeve from St. Joseph's Parish in Lake Orion. We'll see you next time.
Canine Stray Rescue is Oxford's own local dog rescue. Each year they take in hundreds of dogs and bring them into suitable homes. A certified nonprofit organization, Canine Dog Rescue strives to give pound dogs a new leash on life. To donate, adopt, or even volunteer, call them at 248-628-0435 or go to their website, dogsaver.org, and click on the Canine Stray Rescue League link.